Says I'm sharing my screen. Hi, I'm Kathy from Stitch It Together, and I am trying to make a video twice now unsuccessfully because my screen wouldn't share of how to use the edge to edge tier and not have a cut off pattern at the top. So in other words, to have a complete pattern instead of a cut off pattern. So I'm in simulation mode. This is just what it looks like when you're in simulation to set your safe area. I'm just selecting the first design. It wouldn't matter what design you're in. I am going to set a height that is easier to say. See, right? I'm going to say set 7 inches. I'm going to leave the spacing like this. You would want to make your spacing however you wanted it. Well, just for grins and giggles, we'll just increase a little bit of spacing on that one. Just so you can see it doesn't change anything in your design section right here if you're doing a pantograph. So I'm going to go to next. So if you're going to use a quilt pantograph and pick your select quilt top edges, you could do it this way. But if you were trying to get it like in an actual row, you might consider this one. It would work the same way no matter where, no matter which one you chose, because it's in the next screen that you're going to be making a bit of a change. So no matter which one you used, this will apply. But you might consider if you're trying to actually stay in a row, maybe using this one, but make your pattern a little bit smaller than your actual row is. So you've got a little bit of wiggle room in there, or you might have your pattern get cut off at the bottom. Or the top or both if you're not careful. But I would want your pattern, you would want to have your pattern just to be a little bit smaller than what your actual row size is. Otherwise, it might not fit. But I'm going to do it like a pantograph. I'm going to pick this right here. And I'm in simulation mode, so I'm not looking, I'm not at my frame. I'm just going to arbitrarily pick some edges so that we can move to the next area, next screen, because that's where the change is going to take place. So now this is supposed to represent my quilt top. I've selected my edges. So this should be the top of my quilt, and these should be the sides. The white area should now represent my quilt top. So I'm going to say next. Now the problem is that QCT wants to cut off this pattern right here, and we can see that clearly it's cutting off the top of the pattern. And because these are green, they look like they're set, because remember, if they were gray, you would know you would need to tap them to actually set them. But what people don't realize, and I didn't realize this until just recently, is you don't have to accept these, and you can actually reset this pattern. And if your machine is frozen, you would, like, your carriage is stuck or stopped, you would go to your toolbox up here and you're going to say released carriage. So now your sewing machine should be free. And you're just going to move your sewing machine to, just imagine these marks. You're still going to make these marks, but we're going to physically move that pattern down so that it's not going to cut this row off anymore. So you're going to have to pick a spot that is roughly 2 inches off the side of your quilt, and you're going to have to just start playing with it. So if I were to move my sewing machine right to here, so that's supposed to represent my sewing machine needle, and it's off my quilt. And then I actually physically, what I'm doing now, and you can't see it, is I'm physically tapping this left button right here. I'm physically going to tap it on my screen. Do you see how it moved the pattern down? And so it doesn't look like it's cut off, but I'm going to physically move. If I was at my machine, I would move it down just the tiniest bit again, just a little bit, and then I'm going to tap the green button again. Okay, so now clearly you should be able to see that it's not going to cut this pattern off now. And I can see that it's not cutting it off on this side either. But if I didn't have a straight quilt top and this one was not set the same distance, this side of the pattern was needed to be adjusted, I could do exactly the same thing. I'd move my machine over here and I'd pick roughly where it needs to be. See, now I just tapped it and it's too high. So I would move it again. There we go. So now I moved it and I tapped it again, and now it's where it needs to be. So you might need to play with this side too. But once you get them exactly where you want them to be, now you really do need to make your marks. So now you would move your sewing machine close to that area and then tap move left, and it's going to give you marks. And this time those marks would be so that if anything happens in this first row and you need to restart and get this pattern exactly right, you can. You would actually want to use these marks. So don't skip this part. You do want to have them. So I've made a single stitch there that I can find and move my machine over here and say move right. And I'd make this mark too, a single stitch, and I'd make that mark. And then I'd go to the next screen. And now you can see it's not going to cut off this pattern. It should do the whole thing, and it should be exactly as normal from here on out, except for now you don't have a cutoff pattern. Now, if you wanted to use let me go back a couple screens. If you wanted to use this function instead, where you have 4 corners and try and fit it in an actual row, you would want to make sure again that your pattern is just a little bit smaller so you've got something to work with. You're not worried about cutting your pattern off just because your space isn't big enough, but you would do exactly the same thing. You would set your area right here, set your corners, or using your seam lines or whatever you're going to use to set that area. The problem, it looks like fine right here, but the problem would be you go to the next screen, you go, oh no, it's still going to cut it off. But no, not really. You would just need to reset these nodes. So you'd bring your sewing machine so that you just, oops, move my sewing machine there, tap this button again. There we go. Simulation mode did that. So I just moved my sewing machine a little bit until I was sure that it was inside this area and it wasn't going to cut any of it off. And then I would absolutely still want to make those marks, because again, if something happened and I needed to fix this pattern, I would need to have these marks or I'd really have a mess. So you would definitely want to still make your marks. Move right, and then you get to the next screen. I'm just going to say, oops, ignore. Let's just do that. And see, now it's not going to cut any of that pattern off. So I hope that this helps. I didn't know until just recently that you could play with those nodes too, even though they're green, and that you can move them. And that's how you would do that. So I'm Kathy at Stitch It Together, and I hope this helped you.